Hi, welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial we're going to continue with our 3D logo design using Blender. So I'm going to open up this folder and we'll finish on version 4. So if I open up version 4 and go to the 3D viewport, 3D view here, we can see our logo with our lighting scene, and we can use our middle mouse button to rotate around our selected object. At the moment the particle emitter is selected, so we're rotating around that particular object. We can see the camera there in the back. So when we finish in our last tutorial, if I press F12 on the keyboard, we can render out one frame, and we added this glare effect. So let's just quickly look at that again. It will take a bit of time to render because we're rendering out a full high resolution 1080p frame. It'll take a little bit longer. So here we can see one full frame, and we added this glare effect to the objects using our node editor. So let's go back to the 3D viewport. We're going to file, save as, and let's save this as version 5. Make a new version, and for now what we're going to do in the camera, in the render settings, we're going to set the render to 50 or even set it to like 40%. That will just make a smaller image rendered, but it will just render a lot quicker, just so that we can work with the objects quickly, and then we'll render out the full frame at the end when we finish off our updates. So what we want to do is go and work out what our very last frame is going to be. So to do that, we need to scrub through. First of all, let's press 0 on the keyboard. So when we press 0, we can see what the camera sees. And we're going to scrub through our timeline, and we're going to look for a frame at the end where there's no objects moving, so none of these particles. You can see there's a particle there still moving. So we're going to look for a frame where there's no more particles moving in the background. And I think around frame 110 for me. Your one might be slightly more or slightly less, but around frame 110 I can't see any more particles. So I can go to this end frame here now in the render settings and set the end frame to 110, because there's no point in rendering at 250 frames if it's just going to be a still image at the end. So we'll set that to 110. Let's just save this. Save. And the other thing we want to do is probably get the, this final render, this image here. We probably want the logo to be a bit closer, so we should really work out what the very last frame is going to look like. This will help us a little bit. So we'll click on the camera on the edge here so it highlights in yellow. And one other thing we can do quickly here is in the objects here, the cylinder we should rename to emitter, because that's what it is, and the plane, which is the floor, we should really call that the floor. And the floor, we want to click this little option here, this arrow option, and this stops the floor from being selected by accident. That's all it's going to do. And the other elements are really out of the way, so those should be okay. But the floor, we want to just untick it so we can't select it at all. That's what we want to do. So we're going to click on the camera. You can click here to click the camera to select it, or click on the edge, and we want to select lock camera to view, and we're going to use our mouse wheel to zoom in a little bit, just like this. And we'll also want to use this Z axis just to bring the logo more centered, something like this. So if we press F12 now, the logo is going to fill up much more of the space, and that will be our end frame. That's what it's going to look like after we've done all the animation and everything else. This will be the final frame, let's say. So let's have a look at that in the high resolution. So we'll set this option to 100. We'll press F12 again. We can see a high resolution version of this. just want to see what it looks like, because this will be the very last frame of our video intro. I think that looks okay. That's fine. You can tweak it. You can have it zoomed in a bit more or out, or however you want to do that. It's your choice. But I quite like that, so I'm going to stick with that frame there. I'm going to press escape on the keyboard, and we'll set our rendering back down to 40% for now. Let's just save this, and we'll unclick lock camera to view. If these options are not showing, you need to press N on the keyboard to hide and show them. Letter N on the keyboard. So the next thing we want to do is actually animate the camera itself. And what we're going to do in this bottom corner here, where these options are, this little box here, next to it you're going to see a little triangle, and when you move over your mouse over there, it's going to turn into a cross, and you want to left click, hold down and drag up. That's going to create a new window, and in this new window just here we want to select graph editor. So we have a timeline down here, we have the graph editor above, and the next thing we want to do is click in this top section up here. So you can click in the grey anywhere up here just to make sure that this window is active, and then we're going to press number 7 on the keyboard to go into top view, and we're going to press number 5 to go into orthographic, and we're going to zoom out with our mouse a little bit, and we're going to press, for now we're just going to press shift and C, shift key and C, and that will center the 3D cursor into the middle of the screen. And we can zoom in with our mouse, and we're going to press shift A, and we're going to insert an empty cube, and we're going to press S to scale, and we're going to scale the cube down so it's just about the same size in terms of height or width as this logo. And now we're going to press number 1 on our keyboard, and that will take us to front view, and we can hold down the shift and the middle mouse button. Holding the shift and the middle mouse button will allow us to pan around, and we're going to click on this blue arrow. The empty is already selected, and we're going to want to move this empty object into the center here. We're going to press number 7 again to go back into top view, and we're going to zoom out this time, and we're going to click on the camera, and we're also going to hold down the shift key and click on this empty here. So we have the camera and the empty selected, both objects will be selected, and we're going to press Ctrl T on the keyboard, Ctrl T, and track to constraint. This will make sense in a moment. So let's save this. Now the next thing we want to do is we're going to move to frame 1. So we can click this button here, and this will take us all the way back to frame 1. And we're going to click on this record button here, and we're going to make sure we've only selected the camera. So just click on the camera, it will turn yellow, so click on the camera, and we're going to press the letter I on the keyboard, letter I, and this will insert a keyframe, and we'll insert a location keyframe. So we'll insert a location keyframe here, and then we want to move to frame 12. So let's move to frame 12. In fact, what we'll do is we'll move to the very last frame. Let's go to frame 110, and we'll set a keyframe here as well. So we've got a keyframe at the beginning and a keyframe at the end. Now we can move to frame 12. We can just click on this little box here and type in 12. And we're going to insert a keyframe, so we'll press I, and we'll insert a location keyframe here as well. Okay, cool. So we need to move to frame 1, and we'll have 3 keyframes here. They're all the same at the moment, but this first one we're going to change it. And we're going to press 0 on the keyboard, and this will take us into camera view, and we're going to lock camera to view. Click this option here, and we're going to click on the side of the camera, on the left or the right hand side of the camera, and we're going to hold down the left mouse button and we're going to drag to the left, and we're going to rotate it around to something like here. Something like this, and we may, in fact, let's if we use the mouse wheel, we can zoom out a little bit. So we can use the mouse wheel down to zoom the camera out a little bit more, and we can rotate it around a little bit more as well. Do something like this here. So if we press play, we go to the first frame. It's on the first frame. The camera is going to spin around like this, around the edge, like that. Okay, cool. Let's click this record button to stop recording, and let's click this lock camera to turn it off. Now we also want to do something with the actual logo itself, but let's save this for now. Save. So we're going to click on this tutorial text, and we're going to click on the record button one more time, and we're going to press I to insert. Up here, press I to insert in the camera view, in the 3D view, press I and click location, and we're going to move to frame 12. In fact, we can let's stay on frame 1. We'll stay on frame 1, and we'll click this text above as well, and we'll insert a location frame here as well. So we do it for both of these on the first frame, and we're going to move to frame 12, and we're going to click on this. This text is already selected, so we press I to insert location frame, and we click on the tutorial text and press I to insert, and also a location frame here as well. Now we're going to move back to the first frame, and this empty here and the emitter, these two, we can click these arrows here to stop us from selecting it by accident. And then with the tutorial text selected already, we can drag the text out of the screen up to here. And if we use our mouse wheel, we can zoom out a little bit as well, it will help. And we'll click on this text above it, and we're going to drag that above the tutorial text like this. So we're going to stop the record, so we're going to stop recording here, and we're on the first frame, and we're going to play. So let's see what it looks like. So the text is on the side, it's going to come hitting the floor, and then these particles are going to fly out. That's what we see. So we just want to do one more quick thing. We're going to go to the first frame again, and we're going to hold down the shift key on the keyboard and the middle mouse button, and in this section here, the graph editor, we're going to drag across. So this section we can see kind of in the middle of the screen. It'll be a bit easier. And we're going to use our mouse wheel, just the mouse wheel, to zoom in, and we're going to click. We're selecting this DCP web text, the top text at the moment, and we're going to click on this little yellow circle here. It's connected to this point here, this little yellow circle, and we're going to drag that circle to this point up here, and we'll click once to confirm that, left click once to confirm where you've dragged it. And we'll do the same for this tutorial. So we'll click on this, and we'll click on the little yellow circle, make sure you click the right one, this one here, and we'll drag it up to here, and we'll left click to confirm. And what that will do is it will kind of smoothly drop in, and then all of a sudden it will just keep a consistent speed. It won't slow down when it gets to the bottom here now, because it's a flat line. That's why we did that little edit there. So we can see that now, that it just hits the ground straight away. It doesn't slow down and hit the ground. We didn't want it to slow down. There. Okay. let's just try one thing. Let's go to our emitter here, and we'll go into the particle effects, and we need to set the end frame to 12 and the start frame to 12 as well, because our logo hits the floor on the 12th frame, but the emitter was set to 10, so the emitter was showing particles a few frames before the actual text hit the floor. So we need to set that to 12 here in the particles. Select the emitter, go to the particles system, and then set these to 12. So if we play now, the particles fire when the logo hits the floor. Okay, cool. Let's save this. So the next thing we want to do is go to the render settings here, and we want to set the render to 100%. The first frame is 1, the last frame is going to be 110, and it's going to be 1920 by 1080p. That's HD resolution. 1 frame per step, which is fine. We leave the aspect ratio and we leave it at 24 frames a second. That should be okay. And the anti-aliasing will set to 16. That will just give us a slightly better render at the end. And what's important here is the performance. We want to set these to 64 blocks, and this will give us a better render of the image. And in the output options, we want to select this folder here, and we're going to go to my desktop. You need to go into your folder. You need to create a folder called Final Render. So you can click Create Directory here, and just call that directory Final Render, or whatever you want to call it. Just make a new directory called Final Render, something like this. Click on that directory, and then in this box here, we're just going to type in logo, and we're going to say accept. And it's going to save all of the work, all of the different frames. Each single frame is going to save it into that directory, and we'll see that in a moment. So let me just do one thing. Let's have a look here. Okay, that's fine. So now in the renders, let's go back down to here. Let's set the color depth to 16 and set the compression to around 15%, and that should be fine. And make sure you select PNG from here. PNG. So select PNG, set the color depth to 16 and then compression to about 15%. And that's pretty much it. Let's just save this and make sure we're on frame 1 here. So just make sure you're on frame 1, right down here, frame 1. And we can go ahead and come back to the top here of this render section and hit the animate button. When we do that, it's going to start to render out each single frame. The first few frames might be, well, this first frame is black, but we should see something on the second or third frame. So if we look at the folder, we created this folder called Final Render, and each frame will get saved into here. We can see the first frame, and we should start seeing the text coming in on maybe the second or third frame, probably the third frame. So we just wait until we can see something coming in, an object. Here we can see the top of the text here. So these first 2 frames were blank, so it doesn't matter too much. It's worth having a few blank frames. So if you notice, each one is taking, about 15 seconds to fully render. It's about 16 seconds, and we've got to render 110 of these. So it's going to take some time. If we'd said 16 seconds a frame times 110, divide that by 60, we're looking at about, it should take about half an hour, just over half an hour to render out all the frames. So we've got to be a bit patient here, and I think I'm going to go and make a cup of tea and come back, and when I come back we'll see all 110 frames in here. So join me on the next tutorial and in that tutorial we'll see all the 110 frames, and we're going to start to create a video sequence out of these frames, and we'll be very close then to completing this 3D logo tutorial. Okay, look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.